Hello, I'm Barbara Peters from the Poison Pen in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was our pleasure last night to welcome Craig Johnson for the National Book Launch of his new Walt Longmire mystery, Daughter of the Morning Star. What a terrific book. And the pacing is really all determined by basketball because Walt leaves Absaroka County, where he is sheriff in the smallest county in the smallest state in terms of population in the United States, and goes up to Montana at the request of the really scary sheriff up there, Lolo, where a girl named Jeannie is missing and her younger sister called Jaya, who's a basketball phenom, but has a really terrible attitude. She comes from a broken family. Her mother's an alcoholic. Her father's in prison. Her sister's been missing for over a year. And while she has fabulous skills, she's got no sense of team playing at all. And Walt, who won a Rose Bowl, understands that Jaya will never succeed in achieving her goals and becoming a basketball star if she can't learn to play as a team. I mean, let's be real. The only thing you can do truly solo in major sports is play golf. So basketball, there you are. Craig said that he used to play basketball, so he understands how the game works. Anyway, due to a technical hitch yesterday, because it was a live event, we moved some of the recording equipment around, and apparently one of the connections got busted. So the Facebook Facebook Live recording that we usually do, unfortunately, didn't work out. And so what we have is we come in the middle of the conversation, but luckily before all the cool questions from the audience. And we recorded that on another device. So that's why I'm doing this little introduction. So when the rest of it follows, you won't wonder what in the world is going on. So we come in upon Craig and me speaking, and I have just said that Jaya is an amazing character, very central to the story, but unfortunately she's a real bitch. So that's where we are. Thank you. A pivotal part of the book. She has a real attitude. She's also incredibly gifted as a sportswoman, but she's a little bitch.
She's kind of ferocious, yeah. She really is. And she's a phenom. I mean, she's an absolute utter basketball phenomenon. And that's not all that unusual. Because on the res, basketball is the king of games. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that what do you need? A couple of hoops and a ball, and 5 people each, or 1-on-1 or 3-on-3 or whatever, And that makes it, it's a strong sport on the reservation. And so, she's a player, and she's really good. As a matter of fact, she is destined, probably for a college, scholarships, maybe even play professional ball. The difficulty being that there's a kind of an attitude with an awful lot of the big schools that the native players won't last out the full 4 years of their scholarship. They'll eventually break down and go back to the res or quit school or whatever like that. And so they don't get an awful lot of the big scholarships that a lot of other individuals get. So it makes it a little bit difficult for her like that. And she's on a team that's not very good. And it's really hard, when you're really good, to be on a team that's not like that, and Walt kind of has to, give her some insights, on what that's like. Walt played on a Rose Bowl team. Walt won a Rose Bowl, for goodness sake, like that. And so he's kind of knowledgeable about, team sports, kind of knowledgeable about what you do to help your other players, increase their game and get better rather than berating them and making them feel bad. That does you no good at all if you're trying to win games, and if you're trying to get a scholarship, if you're trying to even develop yourself as a decent human being like that, you've really got to develop all those abilities like that. So that's one of the jobs that Walt kind of has during the course of this book, is to kind of break the news to her that, hey, you're not going to be an island unto yourself here like that. You're going to have to start, working with everybody else, and that's going to be something that you're going to have to develop as a talent for the rest of your life. The basketball thing, you got that down. Teammate thing, need a little work. And she's, coming from a difficult situation like that. She's got, a father who was in prison, a mother who's alcoholic, a sister who went missing, you know, a year ago that they still don't know where she went or what happened to her or anything. And she was the good one. You know, Jeannie was the good one. Jeannie was the good one that followed the rules, was a great teammate, made all of her, you know, elevated all of her teammates, you know, to make them a better team. All of these things like that. So she's got some kind of big shoes to slip into like that, and it's you know, it's painful an awful lot of the time with that character like that, because you look and you see all of that she's got going for her, all the resources, all of the ability, you know, all of the everything like that, and that she's, you know, kind of pissing it away. So
yeah, but I mean, her family background is so broken and so terrible, you know, that and it makes it difficult for her to relate to other people.
Oh yeah.
And you know, but on the other hand, you know, she's going to just wash away if she can't manage to do that. So that's a big part of the book. And while things are going on in the book, basketball games are being played, and you know, you get to, as I say, it's really interesting. The whole pace of the book is kind of determined by the games.
It kind of flies. Like at the book, you know,
Yeah.
really, it was a very easy book to write. Because everybody always asks, you know, well, you know, how long does it take you to write a book? Well, it varies, you know, from book to book. I mean, there are books sometimes like that. Usually, the ones that take a lot of historical background. Those are the ones, a lot of research. Those are the ones that take a lot more time to do. The one that just came out in paperback, like The Next Last Stand. You know, I kind of had to be an expert on Custer and the Little Bighorn before I could write that book. And I had been avoiding that like the plague, I gotta tell you. You know, and it's not that I have anything against it or anything, it's just that like there are certain facets of Western history that are black holes that you can fall into. And, you know, Custer and the Little Bighorn are one of them. I mean, you know, you can start doing research on that and you can just dive into the pool and never come back out. And so I kind of held it off, you know, trying to, you know, not be so much of an expert on that. But then when that book came along, I was like, okay, now I got to do this. And so that one took a lot of research and a lot of work, like I putting it together. This one was just a joy, you know, to write, simply because it was so much about the characters in the book. It was so much about the personalities, you know, that Walt was dealing with. And I would make the joke whenever I was introducing the book. I would always say, you know, after 17 years, you know, I put Walt in some really difficult situations. But sticking him on a bus with an entire busload of teenage girls, he's never been in a tough situation like that. You know, like it's really kind of difficult for him. You know, he's kind of a combat-hardened veteran as far as that's concerned too. Like that, because I think it's like even in the first page or two, you know, he's trying to get, you know, Jaya to answer his questions. You know, he's asking questions about, you know, deciding whether or not he's actually going to take this case on or not. He's asking her questions about like these you know, these threats, you know, these notes she's been getting. Is there anybody who's been threatening towards her? You know, does she feel like, you know, she's in danger? All these things. And she won't answer his questions. And so what he develops is this attitude of like, you know, he won't throw the ball back to her, you know, until she answers his questions. He just holds on to the ball, like it just waits. And then, you know, she's trying to be tough, like and not, you know, answer his questions. And he's like, you can do that, but I've got a daughter, so I'm completely hardened to this. You know, I will just stand here and look at you for the next 3 days if I got to, until you answer my question like that. And so, you know, so he's a little bit, you know, he's a little bit used to this type of thing.
Well, Walt's away from, you know, from women. Katie is now the assistant, Attorney General for Wyoming. So Katie and the granddaughter are at a distance in the book. Vic's back home. So it's these two women, Jeannie and Jaya, and then Lolo, who are with Walt. So it's a different miss. And we haven't even mentioned Jay and Jeannie's grandmother, who is really a remarkable character. Yay, grandmothers. So, right. If you notice me squirming, I have to tell you, I'm a new mother, as you probably have seen if you've seen our Instagram. These two puppies, which they now are up to 6 pounds from 4. And you have to bend over, you know, to do anything with them. And I just can't. Right, I'm not quite up for this yet, but we're getting there. I left Rob home with the puppies tonight. What insanity prompted us to adopt 2 puppies? I can't even imagine. They're so cute. But it reminds me that parenting is really a full-time job, and there is no full-time parenting going on for these girls.
No, a friend of mine once said parenting was kind of like, you know, where there's a marathon with no finish line. You know, like, that's pretty good, yeah. But even in, you know, if I make it sound like Walt has learned anything, you know, maybe not completely. And there's a part where he calls just to hear his daughter's voice, and you know, she's trying to get his granddaughter to eat, you know, and so she's bribing her with, you know, tapioca pudding for breakfast. And Walt's big mistake is tapioca for breakfast, really? Like, and she's like, oh, really? Would you like to drive down here and try and get your granddaughter to eat breakfast? And Walt's like, no, no, no. He backs out of that one quick, so.
I think we've actually said all we could possibly say about this book without ruining it for you. So why don't we open it up for questions?
Absolutely.
Nobody's had a chance to ask an author a question for so long. So who would like to?
It's so nice to see all of you. Look at it. It is really wonderful. Look at it. So, this is more people that are in my town. Like it's. It was really looking kind of grim there for a while. That was like the first interview I started doing after I guess the quarantine thing a little bit was kind of funny like that because people would say, well, how's the quarantine been there in New Cross? And I'm like, what quarantine? I go into a room and write about my imaginary friends all day every day. The nearest town to me is 25 people. Like, is there something going on I should know about? Yes, sir.
When in your life did you discover that you have the talent to be a writer?
I'm still working on that.
I really admire people who can write.
Oh, thank you.
You write so well, and I would love to be a writer, but I'm not any good at it.
That's no excuse. Look at just simply because, that's the attitude everybody has when you first start out. I guess there are these phenoms like Jaya is with basketball that come out and are 22 years old and write the National Book Award winner and things like that. So I know there's happened like that, but boy, that's few and far between. As a general rule, like that, it's just like anything else. You got to go out and do it. It'd be like basketball. You could sit around and watch videos and read books and all that stuff like that. But until you get the ball in your hand and get out there on the court, it really doesn't mean anything. Like it's the same thing with books. I think there's a writer in every single person in this room. The difficulty is there's also an editor that strangles the writer to death before they get anything down on paper. One of my favorite quotes, actually a lot of my favorite quotes about the teaching of writing come from Wallace Stegner, who taught at Stanford like that. And the list is legion of all the writers that he produced, for goodness sake. And one of the statements that he made in an interview was somebody asked him, he said, writing is so subjective. How do you teach writing? And he goes, that's not what I do. And they said, well, what do you do? He goes, well, everybody's got that one little ember, somewhere in them, that one little flicker of a flame of an ability to write. And he said, my job is to wave that and get oxygen to that and let it flourish and see what happens. Then it's up to them, to decide, if they're a writer, where they're going, what they're going to do with it, and all of that. And I think that's really an honest appraisal with it. It's just a question of finding that little part of yourself that you think that you can utilize, and then sitting down and doing it.
I think that's really a rare talent. I think we're all good at something. For example, I'm the world's greatest fighter pilot.
Aha! Wow!
I say so. But I would love to be able to play music. I would love to be able to write, and I'm not any good at it.
Right. Well,
really
it's always going to be a question of when you get to a certain point, you think to yourself, okay, maybe my time is better served, doing something else like that, And then, of course, the other quote that I have from that is Studs Terkel, it says, you can't make a writer out of a born druggist, So, you can look at it both ways, and say, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I know that the one thing that does happen is if you don't try, it never will happen. And the other thing is it's awfully harsh on yourself to make that judgment call. Even if, and then you also say to yourself, okay, do I want to be like a New York Times best-selling author? Or do I want to sit down and write some stories that I know that nobody's ever going to know if I don't write these down? Yeah. I want to pass these on. And I remember I went to the 69th reunion for the Doolittle Raiders with some good friends of ours. A good friend of ours, Bill Bauer, was one of the Raiders. And we went to that. And I remember sitting there with all these guys in their 90s, and they're telling stories about the raid, about flying B-25s, notice how I curtailed this right into your fighter pilot thing here. They were talking about all these things, and I'm like, these were stories and things that they were saying that I was like, I have never heard any of this. I've never read any of this, and I've read about that raid and read everything that's ever been written about it. And some of the stories they were telling me stuff I'd never heard like that, or things I didn't know. And so I thought, I'm going to at least write a fiction book where I can sneak some of those stories in just for posterity, like that, so that I can have them there, like that, so that they'll at least be, remembered. And, and I think that's a lot of it there, like that. I mean, to a certain extent, you're the only one in the room, when you're writing. I mean, there are people that write at coffee houses and all that, like that, but I mean, generally, you're the only one in the room, And so, it's kind of important, like, to get that stuff down, like, and have it. The other thing is like maybe the first time you try it, it's like when you read a book you don't like, and then you read it 20 years later, and you think to yourself, "Wow, that book changed." Not really. So that's the other thing is like sometimes you have to get to a certain point, in your life, where you're comfortable with yourself, where you feel like you have a right to sit down and have a voice, and try and write something.
Well, there are a lot of people who write, but good writers are rare, and you're a good writer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Have you guys met my brother? Have you met him? I'll get that 20 to you later, bro. All the way in the back there. Yes, sir.
I came to your writing through the show on TV.
Uh-huh.
And I, dug around a little bit and saw an article where you were interviewed where it said you were very pleased or comfortable with the way the writers of the show represented your characters on film.
Uh-huh.
And is that true?
You sound kind of incredulous there.
It's really hard. You're a writer, I'm a reader, right? And when I read, we're all readers, we visualize.
Oh, yeah.
In some way.
Right.
Where we pick up sense, we pick up feelings, we get to the zone. And then to see that zone represented in
trespassed on.
Just represented a little. Can you talk, were you reluctant to go into the show? Are you pleased? Not a lot about the show back new, but that was a big step.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like, and God, there's so many different directions to go with this question. I guess a bunch of it is that I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, that's what I do. That's my job, to stack up the words, and line them all up like dominoes, and then get into your imagination, which is a really great place to work, by the way. And then just tip that first domino over, and you'll do all my hard work for me. I mean, the key element for me, I think, for an author is to give you not too much, but not too little, that you can read the story and have it all unfold right there before your very eyes. We've all, read the books where there's just too much, where they tell you, she looked like Maureen O'Sullivan. Well, I don't need that, okay? I'll figure that out for myself. You don't have to cast the book for me. And then there are others where it's so vague, you're like, you can have 3 different people read the book and they all read a different book, and so there's a fine line, I think, somewhere in there like that you try and shoot for, at least that I do. And so, that's difficult like that, because, for anything to compete with that is really tough. Because if you're a reader, that's what you do. And if you're a writer, that's what you do. And, I have an advantage, like, I have 2 big advantages. First of all, everything I do is at least 350 pages long, right? Well, that's an advantage over a 42-minute teleplay. Whenever the producers first met with me, in Warner Brothers, like that, they said, your books don't break down to a 42-minute teleplay very easily. And I said, thank God you shouldn't read them if they did, all right? And they said, well, the problem is that, we can only take like bits and pieces from your books, to utilize to make the storylines that we want to make. And I was like, well, it's a different format. It's a different art form. I think the phrase that I've used before is it's like singing about painting. I mean, you really, you can't make a comparison contrast between the two. One's going to go one way and one's going to go the other. I mean, Hollywood has to commit. They have to commit to everything. They have to cast it. They have to wardrobe it. They have to build the sets. They do everything for you. Whereas when you're a book, you're providing so much more. You're providing all of the detail. You're providing the faces, everything, and it's custom fit to your imagination. And it's very, very difficult for Hollywood to compete with that. Very, very difficult. But I don't have to feel too sorry for Hollywood like that, because they seem to do pretty well like that, and make plenty of money like that, and all of that. And so I just tried to approach it, with as open of a mind as I could, to just be open to the idea that, that they really understood the basis of the characters and the world, and all those things like that, and that they would be respectful enough to it, you know, that they wouldn't have Walt on a cruise ship, you know, or, you know, something stupid like that. Did we agree on absolutely everything? Of course we did. You know, but as a general rule, you know, they were really kind of great to work with, to be honest, like, and continue, you know, to be really great to work with. The other thing it's hard to argue with is success. Here we are 4 years after ceasing production, and we're still one of the top 10 original content shows on Netflix. Netflix is throwing up shows every month, millions and millions of dollars of shows, you know, with special effects and big stars and all this kind of stuff. And there's our little cowboy show chugging along 4 years later, you know, still in the top 10, you know, which is, you know, kind of wonderful. You know, I think a lot of it, what it speaks to is a couple of different things. First of all, you know, the depth of characters and the relationships, I think, is a lot of it. Another thing is there's hope, you know? I mean, there was a really wonderful article was in the New York Times, like, and there was this woman that wrote that had gotten COVID, and it hit her hard. It was back before, you know, there was any vaccine, and she got hit really, really hard. And she said one of the things that she did to kind of make it through every night was she would sit and watch an episode of Longmire because the good guys won. And, you know, I'm like, that kind of goes back a little bit to what, you know, Greer Shepard, our lead producer, said. You know, because I kind of questioned their, you know, validity and intelligence whenever they started talking about making a TV show about the sheriff, the least populated county and the least populated state. I was like, you sure you guys really want to do that? You know? And it might be the first time an author has ever done that, right? Try and talk a, you know, studio out.
It certainly could be. But, you know, you're leaving out a key ingredient, which is the brilliant casting. I mean, if it hadn't been for Robert, I think, you know, there have been a lot of things that have hit and a lot of things that have missed. And oftentimes the miss is related to the casting just doesn't
Well, and they had a lot of, like, big names that they were going to have play Walt Longmire. Like, and I kept pulling for the unknown guy. And at that point in time, Robert was a little bit of the unknown guy. But the thing that Greer Shepard had said was, she said, you know, we've kind of been doing this anti-hero thing since the 1960s. I think people are getting a little tired of it. You know, it'd be kind of nice to have somebody that you could actually look at and go, oh, that's, you know, that's when I slide off the road on I-80 in January in Wyoming and the headlights pull up behind me, that's the guy I want, you know, in the truck.
We want to go back to Gunsmoke. We want to go back to, you know, Bonanza, and, you know, even Maverick, James Garner was, it was a,
well, and that's a key element there, like that, because also, I mean, that's one of my favorites, I have to admit, like that is mostly because of the humor. The humor, you know, I mean, I think the humor is a major element, you know, and that was one of the elements I think that was kind of lost, you know, in the television show. Because when we first started out, those first 3 years were on basic cable with A&E, and they had 42 minutes, and the other 18 minutes solid were commercials. And so any script that they wrote, and I got to see the scripts, I got to give them feedback on the scripts and all of that, there was a lot of humor. There was a lot of good stuff in there, like that. And then that was the first stuff that got cut because you had to tell the plot. You had to get that plot done in 42 minutes every week. And that, you know, it was tough. It was tough that way, I have to admit. So.
Yeah, well, long-form streaming television is much better for, you know, for novels too, than that cable format that you're talking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. I've kind of lost the ability to watch TV with commercials. You guys too? I know I have. You know, I'm sitting there watching some with commercials after about 20 minutes. I'm like, done. That's it. Can't watch it. You know.
It's not just that, it's they have enough room to tell the story, you know, because a book, as you say, 350 pages does not make a 42-minute presentation. It'll be interesting when Mr. Morris is here with the Tony Hillerman biography. Robert Redford, who was instrumental in the not successful Joe Lee-Corn television, is back at it. And they're going to use long-form television now, and they're going to make...
With Zahn McLaren as one of the leads. Where did they find him? Where could he have possibly been? Whenever I'm talking to Zahn, I'm like, you remember where your Indian cop came from, okay?
You're going to slide into
Have you guys seen Reservation Dogs? Have you guys seen any of that? It's pretty funny. It's pretty funty. Like, and if anybody ever questioned whether it is like actors like Zahn, you know, had comic ability, just watch an episode of that. You'll very quickly you'll see.
So, anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, after 20-some books, Now,
17, not 20 yet.
well,
Only 17.
Yeah, but now at this point, when you finished your manuscript, do you send it right to the editor, or do you have a guy that's a friend of yours or whatever, kind of go through it and say, oh, no, Craig, this isn't going to work?
She's sitting back there in the back row. Yeah. And she's some kind of fierce. Okay, you know? I mean, whenever anybody asks me, how do you write those ferocious female characters? And I'm like, yeah, do you know any other guy? Come to our house for the holidays. Okay, you know? But no, yeah, it's interesting too, like, because that's another question I get asked by a lot of students. They're always like, well, should I, especially if it's like, a college class or like, older people, like, and they say, like, well, should I let my wife or my husband, read my books? Like, and I'm like, yeah, that's a double-edged sword. That can go your way, One thing, that's somebody that knows you better than anybody. And so that's the real advantage that Judy has over all of the marvelous, wonderful editors that I have back in New York. They're incredibly intelligent, incredibly insightful, incredibly talented, but they don't know me as well as Judy does. And so, she can really see what I'm doing with my dialogue, or she knows when I'm pulling a character out away from somebody and I've forgotten a certain facet of their character that I need to add in, things like that. Also, she's right there, I mean, when I'm writing, I can say, hey, listen to this scene, and see what you think about this. Or I finish a chapter, and I have her read it back to me aloud. That's another one of my major tricks that I'm always telling students in workshops is that, give your work to somebody and have them read it back to you, because you will hear every mistake you make, like, as opposed to like reading it yourself, where you kind of edit on the fly and kind of fix things as you go. You can't do that when somebody's reading it back to you. You're like, okay, I need to fix that. And even worse yet, if she's reading it back to me, usually it's when we're in bed at night. If I fall asleep, that's a real problem. So, but that's a lot of it right there. So she's my go-to, and she's got newspaper background. She's got a much better education than I'll ever have, and then a knowledge of me and a knowledge of those characters. I mean, she's been around those characters for 17 years. I've gone through 5 different editors at Viking Penguin, I think, since I first started. And they go back and they reread the books like that, but Judy remembers everything, about those characters and about those books. So it's kind of handy.
Well, she lives in Wyoming. We can't overlook that.
That's right. She does have an insight.
New York doesn't have a visceral understanding of Wyoming. Let's be real. Anybody else have a question?
I just want to say I love the Tuesday teasers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I didn't know if I was doing something wrong with that, But then, a lot of people wrote and said, I didn't read them. I didn't read them because I didn't want to, and I was like, well, that's okay. You don't have to. It wasn't enforced. You didn't, nobody's going to come to your house and make you read them like that. But I just thought that it was kind of nice to give to everybody, through the year, to let them know kind of like what direction the book is going in, or just little insights, into the characters in that world, as the year went by. So thank you, because I was curious as to whether that worked or not. Okay. Yeah. But that was one of those things I tried. I wasn't sure if it would work or not. And then we did the 52 pickup thing, I think, with Rye, which was fun too. Like, to give essay answers, to questions, and we'll do those again. They'll be doing that again, and then of course the 30 seconds of Zen, which I enjoy. Every week I try and do that. It makes it a little easier. Did anybody else have trouble keeping in mind what day of the week it was during all of this? Because I would be like, oh, it's Sunday. It's okay. So it's 30 seconds of Zen. And so that kind of helped. I got to admit, when I'm in that room all by myself.
Like every day is Saturday.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it sort of goes that way.
You have another question?
It's just a yes/no.
Okay.
Can you do a yes/no?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe not. I don't want to speak too soon here. Totally possible to be an extended no or yes.
As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of the series, and one of the series that really impacted me growing up as a kid was the Hardy Boys.
Uh-huh.
And did the Hardy Boys have any influence on you growing up, or were you familiar with them at all? Or
I was, but no, not really.
Okay.
I was a classical literature snob, I think, at an early age. My mother was a big reader. My dad was a big reader like that, and so they kind of like nudged, books our way, as we were growing up. And I don't know, I really didn't come to mystery fiction, crime fiction, until much later in life. I think it was Jeffrey Household's Rogue Mail.
Oh Lord, one of
Yeah.
the best thrillers ever. If you've not
Yeah.
read Rogue Mail,
I
you
read
want to go
Rogue Mail
back.
and I was like, ooh, this is a whole like genre that I'm kind of missing, isn't
Really
it?
brilliant. It's
Yeah, it's
truly
fantastic
Road
book.
or road?
Rogue, R-O-G-U-E.
Okay, road.
Right.
Yeah. And
If you like Ken Follett or Frederick Forsyth, it's kind of in that school. But I mean, it's always on the list of best thrillers. And
oh yeah,
I
magnificent
still
book.
remember. Yeah, it really is.
And I remember when I first started, like reading mystery novels, like that's what I did. I read all the classics. I read all of the Agatha Christie's, all of the Raymond Chandlers and the Dashiell Hammetts, all of those, because I felt like I had to get through those, before I could move on to the more modern stuff at that point in time. But they had an influence. Like I mean, Western Star is a direct nod to Murder on the Orient Express. And whenever I found out that the Wyoming Sheriff's Association used to have their yearly meeting on a train, I was like, oh, here we go. All right, okay, They also used to tell me, oh yeah, they were all drunk by the time they got to Rawlins. Like, okay, even more, fodder, so.
So we answered your question, sir, which is no.
A little longer than yesterday. That wasn't that bad, was it? Yeah. Always, whenever I'm doing the Zoom calls, they're always like, and we're going to save 10 minutes at the end for a question and answer. And I'm like, yeah, you might want to do more than that. Because it takes me 10 minutes to answer one question, for goodness sake.
All right, so we have time for a final one. Does anybody else got one?
It's been all men questions here. Like, yes?
No.
I was just going to tell you how much I enjoyed that video of you today. That was yesterday.
You had a video today?
I had a video today.
Terrific.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't speak to the acting quality, but the technical part was pretty good, wasn't it?
The first thing I said to my daughter is, I said, somebody is really taking care of him and pushing him in the right direction.
That would be the one in the back row. Yeah, no, how that happened, what happened was, they asked me to do, because I was the guest of honor for BoucherCon in New Orleans, that, not only got folded by the Delta, but, COVID disease, but also got hit by a hurricane. So I don't know what's going to happen in 2025. I don't know, they should be bidding to not have BoucherCon, so, but I was one of the guests of honor, and so they had me, they asked me if I would do the intro for the Anthony Awards. And so, I was like, okay, I can do that. And they asked me, they said, well, do you want to record it, or do you want to just do a Zoom call? And I was like, aren't we all kind of tired of Zoom calls? I'm really kind of tired of talking heads, And so I said, we'll record something. We'll make something up. Well, the good news is my buddy Chet Carlson, who's a cop back in Minnesota, came out and he came out and because it was Longmire days and so he came out and stays an extra week because I put him to work doing firewood and everything. And so I don't know if he'll come back next year or not. Anyway, that's what happens when everybody comes to visit me. I put him to work And so anyway, he came out and I said, Chet, what do you think? Can you do that? Because we did it with a phone. We did it with like an iPhone 11 or whatever it is. And those things have really good cameras on them. They're really, really good. And so I said, what do you think? And he goes, yeah, sure. Well, he immediately launched into this. And he says, well, we got your car, because I got an old 67 fastback Mustang And he said, we can have the car fly by, and then you can be in the Bronco, and you can wake up, or we can have you eating a donut or something He immediately bought into all the cop, stereotypes. And so he said, well, and then, we can have you pull them over, and then you can, introduce, when you hang in the window, after you pull them over, you can do the intro, to the awards, and so we did it, and it worked really, really well, and so then we had it, and Viking Penguin said, hey, is there any way you can do, some videos to the different Facebook groups and all this, and I was like, wait a minute, You know, we've got the beginning and the end of that. So the only thing we would have to do is just switch out the part where I walk up, you know, to, you know, the car. Like, so there's some continuity issues. Like when you get right down to it, the shirt is slightly different. You know, when the hand comes up, it goes here rather than up here. So there's some little issues that we had. Like, but as a general rule, it was kind of fun to do. Like, you know, Chet was great. You know, piecing it all together, editing it, you know, and doing all of that. And then we threw the Longmire music in there, you know, with it, you know, which was kind of funny. You know, because, you know, Facebook contacted me and said, you know, you do not have the rights to use the Longmire music. And I wrote it back and I was like, the hell I don't. They reversed on that one quick.
Now, we winded up by saying that this story is complete. You will follow it to the end, and it has a real end, but the story isn't over. And Craig has already written the follow-on book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the book that's coming out, you know, next year, like it was the fastest I've ever written. It was done at the end of July.
Wow.
You know, I started it in January, finished it up at the end of July. It was done. Boom, done. And it's definitely going to be the strangest Walt Longmire book ever. It really, really is. Like that, you know, because by the time Walt gets to the end of this book, you know, there's an ending. We find out what happened. There's physical evidence. All of this, but Walt just has this feeling that there's more to this than maybe he knows, and needs to go and find out what that is.
So I'm hopeful for Virgil.
Yeah.
So let me ask, Larry, can you tell how many numbered tickets did we give out? Because I have a little, or PK, one of you tell me? I can't see that far. 44? 34. Okay, so what I have to give away this evening, which by good chance I happen to find, the #1 best-selling book at the moment is Sally Rooney's Beautiful World, Where Are You? And the publisher very thoughtfully gave me this lovely tote bag and an advance reading copy of the book. So I thought that I would give it to one of you. So Craig, if you will pick a number between 1 and 34, and you have to be here to win. A couple people have lost on. So we might have more than one number. Pick a number and they will get this prize.
13.
Oh, well done.
I'm fighting a campaign for the number 13.
I love it. There you are. I'll give it to you. So I want to thank you all so much for coming tonight. It's just been a joy to see you all. Let's thank Craig as well.